Hello everyone and welcome to a new banner review. This time we'll be taking a look at Bridal Beloved. And, well, I'm pretty sure most people are kind of surprised this is a bit ahead of schedule. Really, the main reason why this video is a bit sooner than expected is purely because Nyla's on there. I'm gonna be completely honest. For those who don't know, I already have a plus 10 base Nyla, so of course I was pretty interested in this banner already purely because, well, it's Nyla. Nyla, Igran... It's mostly Nyla, Igran, and Ira that I really like a lot, so therefore I actually have a motivation to work on this because I was already going to check out certain builds I could do with Nyla to begin with. The other reason why this review is a bit sooner than expected is also because I'm gonna be completely honest here. This banner is not very good. But, well, you'll see once we get to it. As per usual, I'll go from worst to best, and, well, I'm starting with a Oboro. For all two fans of Fate that cares a lot about Oboro and the fact that, you know, Takemi is not with her. Yeah, I'm sorry guys, but there's no way for me to deny this. Oboro is pretty underwhelming. Her stat line looks good at first, but then you realize she's a sword unit, and there's a few units that gives her very strong competition. Now, one of the main issues she runs into is first off not having a pref. This weapon, Pledged Blade, as well as Huge Fan, it's not good. It's really not good, okay? The reason why this type of effect was working so well on Rinka was because she had cooldown -1, meaning getting 2 charge back meant an extra bonfire, right? Here you don't have cooldown -1, it's just 4 attack, 4 def, and you get 2 charge when you get hit if you have a buff up. Now the problem with this is that really the only skills you can combo into this in the same manner as you did with Rinka would be stuff like Moonbow, Ruptured Sky, Noontime, and Glimmer, which are not exactly amazing skill to kill off the enemy. Sure, you can proc it, get hit, and then proc it again, but at the end of the day, you don't have a Wodao effect. It can work with Wrath to some extent, but it's not consistent. Hell, another problem with Wrath is the fact that you will not get the skill ready from 0 to, well, from 2 charge to 0. And even if you do, because you run Time's Pulse in tandem with Wrath, the payoff is just not there. Now, the main thing you can do with this weapon is really stuff like using a 4 cooldown special. Which, you know, Rinka was really good at using Aether, because Aether, you know, with Special Spiral, you have to charge, you get hit, and then you proc it, right? You don't really have an option like this here. You cannot run Aether with this weapon in a way that works efficiently. You'll basically be stuck with 1 charge left, and then you will proc the skill after. It doesn't matter, because it's going to be on your second hit when attacking, which typically means you've already done most of the damage you can do, so Aether is not gonna heal you nearly as much. So unlike Rinka, she can't really use it this well, and in general, this weapon does not really work. The main thing you can do is Special Spiral into this weapon into Ignis. Now, this runs into another problem, that being the fact that this would be on enemy phase, right? On enemy phase, you know, Huge Fan and Pledged Blade, the main reason they run into, the main reason why it does not really help them is the fact that, yes, this is a weapon that can help, until you realize Brave Lucina exists and already gives that effect, but not just when you get hit, but also when you hit back. Which this weapon does not. It only gives you an extra charge when you get hit. Which, not amazing. I keep seeing people saying that this weapon is really broken, and honestly I do not see it. Yes, you can actually hit a bit harder with Ignis because you get 4 attack and defense, and Special Spiral allows you to instantly unload it. But you could also just use a cooldown -1 weapon, and without any support you'd be able to proc Ignis. Yes, you lose 4 attack and res, But, well, first off, this is basing on the fact that you would have a buff. Meaning if you get hit by panic, this weapon does nothing anymore. Slaying will be more consistent as a result, especially in the fact that there's a lot of ways to get hit by panic nowadays. So, you know, it's overall a bit iffy. I will say this weapon is okay, but not worth wasting orbs over. Now, Odd Pulse tie is very similar to Even Pulse tie. As mentioned in my video about Even Pulse tie, they don't really explain that, you know, this only targets character with the special ready. So for example, if you deal with two enemies, one of which has 40 HP, one of which has 42 HP but a spec ready, it will skip the 40 HP because the spec is not ready and hit the 42 HP, granted you have enough HP for it. So the skill is a bit better than what it first appeared, but yeah, it's not amazing. It's overall an okay skill, but most of the unit that you will really encounter that has something like this, well, you run into two problems. First off, the main problem is if you're in AR and the unit is something like Lysithia. Lysithia gets her special always ready through Time Pulse at the start of every turn. Therefore, this skill does not matter. This skill will do nothing for you. And the other problem is, yes, it disrupts dealing with infantry teams, like infantry pulse team. But you'll typically take one down at a time, which by the time that you will actually gain from this skill, you basically will game over because, you know, there's 3 people to hit with the pulse skill, and the third time you get to use that skill, you're on turn 7. So you don't really get anywhere with this. It's overall a very niche skill, and honestly, it's really only good in AR, and AR is not worth wasting orb over, I feel like. That's just my 2 cents. If you prefer really investing into AR, more power to you, but moving on. Now we'll talk about comparison. There's really a lot to unpack here, but let's talk about the elephant in the room, Shannon. Shannon is not all particularly amazing to begin with, but if you're comparing him to Oboro, you have to realize one thing. Balmung is a really good weapon. Slaying Edge is also a pretty decent weapon, but the thing is Balmung is 5 across the board. As long as he gets hit, or the enemies at full HP, which are very easy condition to fulfill. You'll basically be looking at 47 def and 31 res, which is both better in defense and res than Oboro. Then you have the speed, where you have 9 more speed than them, and 6 more attack. You literally just outstats them in everything but HP. Yeah. Then you have the fact that you also have Imperial Astra for, you know, burst damage, which can be comboed into Brave Lucina, so you just basically get hit and proc Imperial Astra, sorry. And you can combo this into Wrath for even more damage. You'll typically be looking at specials of 30 damage with 2 cooldown, and if you have time supposed to combo into Wrath, well, even more damage. It's kind of funny too, because Shannon really needed to get 2 charge when getting hit if the weapon was active, but alas, he simply did not, and Larcey is overall a better unit. Speaking of Larcey, and the main reason why I'm talking about these units first is that I'm comparing a 5-star exclusive to a 5-star exclusive. Not to mention, Oboro is seasonal, which means she's going to be harder to plus 10, because Shannon and Larcey, whether you want it or not, are going to appear on 3-man banners, and 3-man banners have overall much better rate. You're basically comparing a 2.5% chance to a 3.3% chance. Though the odds are a bit different now, it should be more like 2.6 versus 3.4, but the results is really just the same. 3-man banners are so much easier to plus 10 a unit on, it's not even funny. Imperial Astra slash Regnal Astra is unique to Shannon, Larcey, and Ira, and all of these units are absolutely fantastic. I'd say Ira is still better than Oboro to some extent, but that's a bit of a hot take. The main reason I say this is because Regnal Astra is very much a skill you can run on Ira, and Ira runs it still extremely well. While she has less bulk, that does not exactly matter, because at the end of the day, what matters is just killing potential, which Ira has in spade. And of course, Larcey Shannon does it better than her, which, you know. But the difference is that Oboro will typically cost you in the 2000s to plus 10, whereas if you're looking at Ira, it's more around 1000, because weekly banners are just that good. It's about 100 orbs per copy instead of 200. A bit of an upgrade, isn't it? But yes, so it's worth mentioning. And if you're looking about Larcey versus Oboro, boy oh boy, I do not have good news about you. You're basically looking at 39 defense and 37 res. Now, you are behind in defense by 6, but you are also ahead in res by 9. Oboro's biggest problem is the fact that everything is in attack, def, and to some extent in speed. She has no res to really work with, and yes, I went with res plus everywhere here, because really you want to deal with your biggest weakness, and Oboro simply cannot do that effectively. Larcey is the best of the three because she really doesn't really have that much of a weakness. At the end of the day, if you have Larcey's Edge on top of a buff, you have 45 defense and 43 res. This is insane, and the enemy cannot buff whatsoever against you, which, again, this is insane. Not to mention, you have a fuck ton of attack. You're basically looking at 67 attack. And that's without a seal, that's without anything, that's just straight up the weapon and buffs. Don't let me add on top of this Wrath and the fact that the weapon is cooldown -1, which makes it overall better than Shannon. Cooldown -1 is just really excellent with 2 cooldown specials. And, well, let me just put it this way, combo this into Wrath, you're basically looking at 30 damage a pop, and unlike Shannon, who cannot just proc, get hit, and then proc again, Larcey very much can proc, get hit, and then proc again. This is her biggest strength, and also Ira's biggest strength with Slaying Edge back when she was released, and it's still very much a very strong thing that Ira can still do. But yes, Larcey overall has better bulk than Ira, and is obscenely annoying to deal with. Yes, you can run low skills on Oboro, but the difference is that Larcey can run Wrath, and effectively have a low skill through her weapon, whereas Oboro cannot do that. That's just kind of a fact. And even if you want to stray from Regnal Astra to, say, Aether, and combo this into Special Spiral, Larcey very much can work with this. Again, 45 def, 43 res. Very easy to combo into Aether if what you want is sustain. Yes, Regnal Astra is overall better, but that's mostly in burst damage. If you're talking about using a unit, but using a unit in general for more than, you know, arena or short maps, Aether becomes sometimes preferable depending on the map. And yes, Larcey very much can run this. Again, cooldown -1 enables a lot of stuff, and the difference between her cooldown -1 and Oboro's cooldown -1 is an extra 6 attack, 4 speed, 4 def, 4 res, and buff immunity, which is huge. Absolutely huge. So, yeah. Overall, Larcey is just simply way better than Oboro and cheaper, which really just makes Oboro pointless to even consider building. As the reason why Soleil is here, if you compare just their offense, Oboro and Soleil are not that far off. If you compare their bulk, yes, Oboro has 7 more defense, but 6 less res. The reason why this is important is the fact that Soleil is a 3 to 4 star unit and has overall a better stat line. It's a more balanced stat line of defense and res, which actually help a lot in making the unit shine. So, yes, if I were to choose between Soleil and Oboro, I would pick Soleil. And I know some people will point out, oh, but Soleil could also get a pref on top of this. Do not even consider that. I'm saying this purely from the point of view of you're going to get disappointed for the next year. They are focusing on 5-star exclusive that actually needs help. And then there's, you know, obviously the outlier with World of Thracia Olwen, who ended up, for some bizarre reason, ended up getting a refine when she really did not need one. But if you take her out of the picture, oh boy, it's typically characters that need the help, and sometimes they just don't get the help. Looking at you, Leaf. Looking at you, S. America. But with that said, you know, Soleil is a 4-star unit, and easily the best Gen 2 4-star unit of the game, in my opinion. There is just so much versatility you can do with this unit. She has a lot of bulk where it matters. She has good attack. She has good speed. And the reason why she has 10 flowers while the other ones have 5 is because she can just have more than everyone. And that makes a huge difference. Like, you see a Gen 4 compared to a Gen 2 here. And the Gen 2 is actually better for the most part. Purely because of the flowers. I did not also bring Brave Alm, despite the fact that Brave Alm is similar, because I've already made a comparison of Brave Alm to Soleil back in the Brave Banner review of last year. I've already mentioned and gave my 2 piece on Alm and why he is an underwhelming unit and fairly underperforming, especially now with Brave Lucina basically not working with his pref whatsoever. And the fact that Soleil is very similar stat-wise to Alm, okay? There is no reason to waste so many orbs on plus-10ing Brave Alm when Soleil does very similar stuff, because you are not going to be using Draco Falchion. Because Draco Falchion basically disable any chance of you running support, okay? So you typically run Heart's Blade, and if you compare Heart's Blade Soleil to Heart's Blade Brave Alm, there's like no difference. They have very, very, very similar stat lines, at least if you try to have equal defense to Reds. So yes, overall Soleil is better than Brave Alm purely because she costs less and does more or less the same thing. And before someone point out Sand Scale does not allow you to hit back with distant counter, which makes the whole skill fairly worthless overall. It's good with Brave Sword, sure, but it actually hurts you using it. And the second you get hit by a ranged unit, you are useless, which is why you typically do not run this skill in general. Most Pref A skills are not very good, in case you have not realized. Outside of, say, Ostian Counter, which is just better DC, there's not a whole lot of Pref A skill that are worth using. So, yeah, Brave Alm is no surprise, because A skills are super strong, especially now. Fortress Def Res, Steady Stance 4, Warding Stance 4. There is so many good A skills that Sand Scale just does not compare. But yes. After covering my bases, let's move on. I am not going to make a build for Oboro, because Oboro is not worth investing in. I rarely do this, okay? I really, really, rarely do this. It's typically if a unit literally has no point in existing that I do this, and Oboro very much fall into that category. There is no reason for you to use her over Soleil. That's just a given. The only thing you can do with Oboro that Soleil cannot do is a pure attack and def build, completely ignoring res, which is simply not worth it because you do not deal with purely physical units. That's just not a thing. You will always have to deal with magic units, and what are you going to do against, say, Winter Sophist? You're just going to die. So, yes, moving on. Next up is Raphael. Yes, he is not at the bottom of the list, because his weapon is actually pretty decent. It also allows you to enable a few things. Now, I've already said this in the past. The most important thing a dancer has to do is surviving and supporting. This weapon is probably the best supporting weapon we've got from an easily available unit. I want to stress this, from an easily available unit. The only tools that are typically better are Legendary Azura because the extra movement, and Peony because her weapon gives you attack and speed throughout the entire map, on top of giving you 3 across the board when you get danced by it. On top of buffing people that are just within range in general of the weapon after you sing, which is a lot of support overall. But this weapon is from a unit that's easy to plus 10. The problem I have with this unit, and this is going to be a recurrent theme, is the fact that the stat line is just fairly min-maxed. Raphael is not too bad with this, but I really wish this stat line was given to a unit that was not a beast unit. The fact that he is a beast unit kind of sucks because you can't run something like Safeguard or Vanguard or Rearguard. I think that's the Axe one, which is basically giving you 7 defense when you get attacked, which, you know, mitigate the fact that there is such a difference in def from res, especially since you can refine said weapon, so the gap becomes 31 def, 41 res, instead of 20-41, right? But alas, that's not exactly a thing you can do. So, unfortunately speaking, I suppose you're kind of stuck with this. Still, though, this weapon is really good. It's a slightly nerfed version of Veloria. Veloria gives 2 charge to herself and her supported unit. But the difference with Veloria is she's basically having a support weapon on a unit that's not meant to support at all. A Dancer is meant to support, so having this in your weapon is a lot more helpful than, say, Veloria, because you can still dance with the character. You're not just bringing it to give you charge, and, you know, hopefully Veloria will pull through, which, to be fair, she has a good stat line. Her stat line is based off Iris' stat line after, you know, it was really obvious that Iris' stat line was extremely powerful back then, and, in fact, we can still see the ripple of that even now. The Nyla of this banner has a stat line very similar to Ira. Base Nyla is also basically a blue Ira. There's a lot of characters that are based off Ira's stat line because it's just a stat line that works. Ira was the first one to really pioneer the stat line, though I guess you could also say Athena also brought it to some extent. But Ira was a lot more specifically spread, like 31 def, 23 res, on top of 33 attack, 37 speed, and 41 HP. I don't know why I know this by heart. Probably because Ira is probably my favorite character of the franchise, but, you know, details. Still, this is a really good tool in general. I would say for most players, I would say that he's a must-have, but if you are lacking in dancers, definitely pick him up. And in some cases, if you have a unit that works like an Ira, aka has a 1 cooldown, launches special constantly, and has a really good bulk enough to really combo into Brazen and Wrath, this character is really good to combo into said character. Which, funny enough, his wife is just exactly that. Shocking nobody. So, yes, this is a pretty good supporting tool, but he runs into one problem. So, first off, he's an infantry unit, which is helpful, but now let's talk about comparison. So, really, these are the only 2 characters that you can really compare to him. Leon has a very similar stat line to him, but as you can see, he just completely destroyed her in terms of stats. More attack, more HP, more def, more res. The only thing that he's behind is speed, because his weapon gives res instead of speed, which is honestly kind of depressing. If you're going to give any stat, res was probably the worst stat to give extra points into, purely because, let's be honest here, he has so much res, it's overkill as all hell. But alas, this is kind of what we're working with. Leon and Raysun has the same weapon. It's basically a weapon that heals anyone within 2 space for 7 HP at the start of every turn. This is actually a pretty good weapon, and actually works really well in keeping certain character in brazen range, while also keeping their HP high enough to survive hits. This is extremely helpful for certain Wrath users, just like Raphael's weapon is good for certain Wrath user. Wow, shocking. Now, if you're comparing Raphael to Leon, I would say Raphael is completely better. And you might be surprised by this because, obviously, Leon is a colorless unit. Colorless don't have to deal with matchups, but that's kind of the problem. A lot of things when it comes down to dancers is that they don't really have a whole lot of damage. So having a color is not a bad thing, and it also accentuates your bulk. Obviously, if you have to deal with a losing matchup, this is a bad thing, but if you're dealing with a matchup you're winning, this can actually make the difference between you dying or not dying, which Leon would 100% die from. So there's that. Obviously, though, the speed is kind of a problem, so in a lot of cases, darting stance can actually help alleviate this to some extent, because while, yes, 47 speed should be the amount of speed you aim for, most of the time, your dancer will be the one to provide the buffs, right? Because it's the support unit. Meaning that he himself will not get the speed. So darting stance is a way to alleviate this to some extent as an A skill, because at the end of the day, you don't care about hitting back. So that's an option. Or Steady Posture 3 is also an option, because then you cover your speed, you cover your defense, and you block enemy skills, which is pretty good if you're basically using Raphael as a meat shield, because then the enemy don't gain anything from it. They don't get charges, so you can just safely tank stuff for them. It also patches his defense to some extent, because, like I said, his res is too much. That said, Fortress Death Res is also a good option, so there is that. As obvious as that is, because Fortress Death Res is good on just about any dancers, though I would say Olivia is probably one of the best users of it. Easily able to break 45 in both Death and Res, or actually pretty close, though with Flowers actually 45 Death and Res is very much doable. So, yes, this is pretty good. Now, if you're comparing him to Raysun, however, you'll quickly notice that Raysun, first off, the fact that Leanna has extra movement did not really matter, because at the end of the day, her bulk is extremely shaky, and she, as a result, kind of has problems. The main thing she really has is the fact that her speed is good enough to block certain follow-ups, but that's really it. 63 bulk is not great. You have 69 with Raphael, which is a lot better, also nice. But yes, when it comes on to Raysun, you have 73 and 71. You're basically bulkier in both compared to his death, which is really good. That's one of the biggest winning grace of Raysun, especially since you can combo this into Fortress Death Res. Fortress Death Res plus this, you are basically looking at 38 Death and 36 Res. If you want to have even more, you can combo this into HP Res, so then you have 38 Def, 38 Res. If you are buffed in defense and Res, that's 44 Def, 44 Res, and on top of this you have 45 health. This is overall really good, and like I said, colors actually help when it comes down to Raysun, or dancers in general, because it helps you survive certain matchups so you can just take the hit for your friend. It also allows you to play a bit more aggressive with your dancers, which is really good. It just gives you overall more options. Raysun is overall a very good unit, and he's a 3 to 4 star unit, and unlike Raphael, who's limited to this banner, Raysun isn't. Raysun is overall better than Raphael, I feel like, especially because having extra movement can certainly help. And also, the main thing really is the fact that he's a flyer, so tactics are a lot easier to work with. A lot of your units are going to be infantry. You can't really use Brave Lucina, Raphael, and then another infantry to combo into Brave Lucina, because you're therefore going to lose tactic. But you can do this with Raysun, because he's a flyer. So that's definitely worth keeping in mind. That said, Raphael can do some pretty nasty things, because since he's an infantry unit, he gets a Wodao effect when he's transformed. Also, for those who wonder, none of them are transformed in those screenshots, because they're all beast units, so I'm not really comparing them to non-beast unit, therefore I need to give the extra attack to make up for it, so I just did not bother. But yeah. Moving on to builds, I'm using Fortress Defres 3 here. As I said before, Steady Posture 3 is also a very good skill to run, because as I said again, you can hit decent bulk while also providing more speed, so you can more consistently block follow-ups, and you block specials as well through the guard effect of Steady Posture 3. It really comes down to preferences, so really, you know, up to you. Raphael is also not transformed here. I'm pointing this out right now because every build I've done with Nyla, she is transformed. Just so you have a better grasp, because unlike Raphael, who is a support unit rather than a combat unit, Nyla is very much a damage dealer. So yes. So here you're basically looking at 60 res. Therefore, if you proc Iceberg, you do 40 damage when transformed. On top of having 52 attack. This is worth mentioning purely because, I mean, Iceberg, you get hit, you hit back, get hit, proc. Yeah, so every 2 fights, you will proc Iceberg. Despite being a meat shield, that's pretty solid. That said, do be careful because his defense is not very good. That said, his res is so good he can employ the fucking world, so if that's something you want to run instead of tactics, well, go ahead. That's very much something you can do because, again, he is an infantry unit. Therefore, that can be a problem for tactics. As for the set on the right, it's a bit more based on doing damage. Special Spiral will basically give you your 2 charge back, which means every time you get hit, you'll proc Iceberg immediately, which is 40 damage. Or if you don't have, you know, a Fortress Defres and you run Steady Posture 3 instead, 37. It's still a lot. It's still a lot and can actually catch a few people off guard and get them one shot. So that's pretty good. Especially with Sturdy Stance 2, you're basically looking at 56 attack when transformed, which is really solid. You can also combo this into Death Ploy if you want. I put Attack Ploy because he's very frail, but that's really up to you. There's not really a wrong way to go about it. He's pretty versatile when it comes down to supporting because of his rest stat. So, yeah. Keep in mind also, he also gives 1 charge at the start of the map to his ally unit, so if you're using him as a cheerleader for arena, well, just keep switching the support every time that you're using a new unit. Doesn't need to be S rank, just C is just fine. You'll get the charge either way. So yeah. About all I have to say about Raphael. Now, we're going to start talking about the big boys. Obviously, Micaiah, let's get things started. I'm not even going to start talking about the character right now. Instead, what I will talk about is her duo skill. I'm pretty sure most people have realized by now how broken this ability is, because it does not give you extra attack. This is not like Broadleaf Dagger. And yes, it does stack with Broadleaf Dagger, or Blizzard, or Ursula's Tome, whatever it's called. Basically bolting, but whatever. It stacks on top of it because it is not the same effect. What it does is give true damage based off penalties. I'm pretty sure most people have already seen this image where a level 1 4-star Donald killed a Edelgard like it was nothing, despite the legendary Edelgard, you know, being level 40. That's because it is true damage, meaning if the enemy has -7 across the board, you do 28 damage a hit. Regardless of color, regardless of your attack, you could have 0 attack and they could have 99 def, you're still going to do 28 damage. So if you have a brave weapon, that's 56 damage, and that's why Edelgard died. It's really, really ridiculous. This skill is setting a precedent I'm not really comfortable with, personally. And I will just say this. Right now, it's fine. Okay? It's a fine skill because it's on a duo character. If this skill should ever be in any character's weapon, or on a C skill, like, at start of turn, adjacent ally gets fucking domination. If it's anything of the sort, then we're going to have a problem. But right now, I feel like it's fine purely because you will never encounter characters using that skill against you outside of, obviously, AR defense. So, really, nobody cares. But like I said, if this ever becomes a buff you can give through non-duo means, first off, this character will become useless from one day to the other. I just want to point that out. You'll see why I say this. But also, really, domination is a really broken skill. I do not want to see characters running this. I do not want to have a Brave Leaf running this. It's just not okay. The fact is, using this skill basically means that everybody within the 3 column of you loses 7 def and res. That's 14 true damage a hit. So if you have something like, say, Altina or Legendary Leaf, that's 28 damage. And on top of that, because they lose 7 defense, you get another 7 damage. So it's effectively 42 extra damage in one ability. And that's if they don't have any attack or speed debuffs. Do you see the problem with this skill now? It's a very busted skill that should just not exist. Personally, I wish it just never came to be. But like I said, as long as it's locked to a dual character, it won't be too bad. Now, if that changes, we're gonna have some problems. But yes. Really, really busted skill. As I said, should not exist. Now, when it comes down to Micaiah Duo without the duo skill, I would genuinely say she's worse than Raphael. Because Raphael always brings something to the table. Micaiah has a broken-ass duo skill, but the second you go out of said duo skill, she's not all that. In fact, I'd say she's probably the worst of the 4 Micaiahs we have. Let me just cover all 4 Micaiahs, right? You have Ashiden Festival Micaiah Wu is, I'd say, the best of the 4, because she's a dancer, and she has the rest to actually ploy relatively well, which is something that's a bit unique when it comes down to dancers. She's one of the best at it, and she also has effective damage against armored unit. Now, if you're talking about effective damage against armored in cav units, cav is pretty much worthless, because there's not many cavs, and if there are cavs, this Micaiah here is useless against those. She's a flyer. All of the cavs you're going to see are either going to run Dazzling Staff, or they're going to run Fire Sweep Bow. Either way is not going to end well. Okay? I just want to point this out. 2, the only thing she can really deal with are magic units. And while she can deal well with, say, Reinhardt, for example, here's the other problem she runs into. What happens if she has to deal with a tier Raven Tome? Her speed is so garbage that unless she one-shots, which she loses 40% of her attack at that point, is very likely to miss. And because she missed the kill, well, she typically will get doubled, and because she gets doubled, she most likely is dead. So, not really amazing at that either. Overall, it's kind of iffy. I'm saying this in general because I'm talking from the point of view of someone that used Legendary Leaf. So I do know to some extent when I have to deal with Raven Tomes. 90% of the teams that are Cavs have a Raven Tome to go with them. She just doesn't do well against them whatsoever, and it's very easy for her to miss kills against them. So yes, with that in mind, not much you can do against that. You're just kind of not really good against that. If you're dealing with Cavs in general and they don't actually have a Raven Tome, they typically have a bow unit. If the bow unit gets danced, you're probably dead. Like, you see where I'm coming from here. Being a Flyers does not give her any benefits. Okay? Whereas if you're talking about Ashidan Festival Micaiah, first off, the armor effectiveness, which yes is useful in Micaiah, is also on the Festival version of Micaiah. But because she's a dancer, the effectiveness actually helps more. Because at the end of the day, she's there to support. The fact she can also shut down certain specific unit, like Winter Sophist, effectively, is extremely helpful. And the fact that she's consistent at it is even more helpful. The fact that she has a color actually helps her in doing this. The fact she can actually deploy can also be pretty helpful in doing this. Though, obviously, a res will be typically lower than Sophist and Surtur, but those units are typically going to get one-shotted either way. So, the fact that she can dance, ploy, and kill certain specific unit is pretty helpful. Whereas this one can kill certain units, and that's about it. She can also ploy, of course, but it's not as helpful because she's not meant to be a support unit in the first place, outside of her duo skill. So yeah, that version of Micaiah is really good. If you're talking about base Micaiah, she has a base of, I believe, 29 speed. You can actually build on this and make full use of her attack stat. And hell, you can actually combo this into Sturdy Impact. In which case, Sturdy Impact plus Swift Sparrow plus Speed plus merges plus, everything. You end up having about upward to 48 speed. But also a good def stat and a good rest stat and also a good attack stat. You're basically good all around. This version of Micaiah, look at her speed, look at her def. Believe me, fixing this is just not happening, okay? It's just too difficult. Another thing to note is that even if, base Micaiah's Refine sucks, at the end of the day, Foxstones are a thing, and Blue Foxstone will become a thing at one point. And guess what? She will be a great user of that skill. Especially comboed into a Death Refine version of that weapon. Absolutely amazing, and you'll be very hard to take down. Guess what this unit cannot do? Run anything else than its pref, because it's a colorless tome. It's in the same situation of Beast unit, whereas their main weapon is always a pref. So you can't just inherit a Beast Stone from one unit to the other and just have the unit be a lot better. That's just not something you can do. You're stuck with what you get when you're a colorless tome unit. At least for now. If we end up getting more colorless tome that are inheritable, fantastic. But the way it is right now, that's not the case. You are stuck with Joyful Vows, and there's nothing else you can take. So, already there you lose versatility. All of the other version kind of has versatility, though really it's only worth mentioning with base Micaiah because base Micaiah's version of Tanny is not very amazing. But yes, so base Micaiah can actually be very solid when you build on her speed. The Dancer Micaiah is very good because she's a good support unit that can kill key units and also provide support of any kind. Then you have the Brave version, which can also take enemy debuffs and add them to her stats, which means in layman's term, basically, you can basically take your enemy, debuff him into attack and speed, which is because of her B skill, and then use that to actually become quick, and also fix your defense to some extent. As a matter of fact, Brave Micaiah functions really well with this version of Micaiah because then you can get an extra 6 attack, speed, 7 def, 7 res. Because this version of Micaiah does minus 7 def and res, and Brave Micaiah does minus 6 attack and speed to people that are adjacent to one another, as long as you have enough res for it. So, As a result, you end up having a super charged unit, and comboed into domination, you're basically getting 26 extra damage. This is something this version of Micaiah cannot do. Basically, you have two versions of Micaiah that can end up having a speed stat, and the last one is a support unit. And then you have this one, who does not have a def stat, who does not have a speed stat, and just overall does not really have anything working for her. If she has a buff on her, she gets an extra 6 attack and res. Great. This is very reminiscent to Legendary Julia. What else does it do? Oh, and foe cannot make a follow-up attack. Just like Julia, she would want to run, say, Sturdy Impact to make up for her defense. The difference is that Legendary Julia has about 8 more speed, so you can actually build on said speed. And the second that we ever get Blar Fox, that's not even going to be a problem anymore, because you can end up becoming a brick wall in both def and res, have a speed stat, and hit like a truck. This is something that Micaiah will never be able to achieve unless we ever get a colorless Foxstone, which I do not believe will ever be the case. So, yeah, overall, this unit is very iffy. It's basically the same weapon as Legendary Julia for all intents and purposes. The only thing it does more, right, is the fact that it blocks follow-up, but you would want to run something like Sturdy Impact anyways, so... yeah, at least if you had a speed stat for it. So I guess the weapon can still be useful. The problem is that you'll most likely try to enemy phase with this weapon, and you can't really enemy phase with this weapon at all, because you run into one problem, yet again. You have no defense. Close foil is not really an option really at this point. And, wow. 6 attack and res does not really help you here. It just adds stats where you already have too much stats and does not help you where you actually need help. It's kind of similar to Fallen Julia, but Fallen Julia reduced the enemy's attack on top of getting a follow-up. The reason why that's worth mentioning is because Fallen Julia basically got the prep that Legendary Julia should have had. And then we're going backward again, back to Legendary Julia with this one. I don't know what to say. As for the comparison, oh boy. Oh, not this one. Bramimond. I just want to point out before we start, okay? Void Tome gives an extra 5 attack, def, and res. If the enemy has over 50 attack, which is a very easy requirement to work with, okay? Micaiah gets 6 attack and res, so she ends up at 70 attack when she's buffed. Bramimond is also at 70 attack. You can kind of see where I'm going with this. So they end up with the same amount of attack. Res, you have 48 versus 44, so obviously Micaiah has more res. And as far as defense is concerned, Bramimond has 30, Micaiah has 23. So Bramimond actually has a def stat to work with, whereas Micaiah does not. And Bramimond also has a speed stat to work with, which is worth mentioning for one reason and one reason alone. He has a condition to get a follow-up instead of one to block follow-ups, which is that if the enemy has 35 or more speed, you get an extra follow-up. The thing with Bramimond is that it's very easy to just buff your speed, at least at max merges, at max investment. It's very easy to buff your speed to a point where you either double them because their speed is too shit, or they have over 35 speed and therefore you double anyway. So, yeah, unlike Micaiah, it becomes consistent at doubling. Not to mention, Sturdy Impact is very easy to work with here. Because, see, you could run Swift Sparrow with a speed buff, you're at 41 speed. The enemy has 35 speed, you double. The enemy has 44 speed, you double. You see where I'm going with this? And then you have Sturdy Impact on top of this, so you have 40 defense and 44 res. Again, see where I'm going with this? Yes, Micaiah will typically have more res, But Bravimon is so much better at making that def work, it's not even funny. And you can't even say, oh, but Bravimon is on a mythic banner, therefore he's so much hard to pull, so much more harder to pull. That is correct and also incorrect, because at the end of the day, Bravimon, you can just wait for him to be in a banner with another unit you like. There's that. But when it comes down to Micaiah, you're going to have 1 chance a year plus 1 chance ever with a 8-man banner at 6%. Yeah. Plus then in Micaiah, you have less chances to go for it than you do with Bravimon. That's just a fact. Bravimon, you'll have typically 3 chances a year. You don't have that many with Micaiah, that's just a given. Another thing to note is that Bravimon isn't affected with drives when the enemy when it comes down to the enemy, which means that the fact that, you know, you can get speed buff in combat will not really be a problem unless you deal with steady posture or darting stance. Because the check for the speed happens before combat. So if in combat he has 41 speed while out of combat, well, let's say 40 speed, and out of combat he has 34, and you have 41 speed, you're not going to double. Because out of combat you had 34, so you don't have enough speed for him to proc his weapon. But that's more so a little problem that can happen very rarely. So, yes. I still figured it was worth mentioning. But if you are really deciding to use as a unit between Micaiah and Bravimon, Bravimon typically will do you more. That said, Micaiah has a really good duo skill to work with. So there's that. Now, as far as builds are concerned, there's really not many things you can do with Micaiah. Honestly, I was lost working on her, because at the end of the day, that's really all you can do with her. B slots for flyers are just non-existent. Oh, you want to use Pegasus Flyer? Are you a sword, axe, or lance? Nope. Oh, can't use it. So you have access to, say, Mystic Boost, which doesn't work for her here. Quick Riposte, Aerobatic, Fly Formation. That's kind of all you have access to that really helps. Or Vantage, but Vantage is very iffy, so there's that. I will also say another thing about the way Domination works. There are hard counter to it. The main one would be Brunya and Idun, because they are completely unaffected by buffs. They completely remove them, and therefore completely immune by them. It's similar to how Rid would have a debuff on either one of them, try to attack them and not double because the enemy's debuff are nullified. Same thing with Bond 4 skills. They also shut down the debuffs that you have for when you check the damage. However, obviously the new Fallen Ike is not exactly getting rid of his debuff, he just outbuffed the debuff, which means that yes, Domination works against him, so there's that. So yeah, with that out of the way, if you know you're buffed, and you have Attack Respawn and Attack Respawn 7, you're basically looking at 87 attack. Really good to just take a hit, one shot, take a hit, one shot with Iceberg. That's really all you can really do with this unit. If you don't one shot, you're in a bad position. That's kind of just what it is. As for the set on the right, it's a more aggressive set. Obviously, you're teleporting to your ally to just snipe a unit. So there's that. The main reason you want to use Attack Respawn here is because you will not use her for anything but a mage check, so might as well make her a good mage check. The reason why I say this is because her def is so atrocious. Even if you had Attack Respawn 4, you'd be able to hit 41 defense, and the only unit you'd be able to hit back are bows and daggers, and I don't think I have to explain what happens if a bow hits you. You'll most likely die. Unless you run Iode Shield and then you lose 5 defense, so you still die just from normal damage this time. Joyful Vows is such an underwhelming weapon, it's kind of depressing. But yes, that's about all I have to say about Micaiah. She is a very, very weird unit that just kind of doesn't work with itself, which is kind of a shame. But yes, you can also, instead of using Attack Res Bond 4, you can use Mirror Impact if you want to have a more consistent block follow-up. But it's typically not exactly worth it and you want more damage, I find. But that's just my 2 cents. Moving on to Nyla, the actual really good unit of this banner, and to some extent a unit I would almost call a must. Oh boy, this weapon is broken beyond belief and enables so much shit, it's actually kind of ridiculous. So Bright Fang is basically Nameless Blade. For those who don't know what Nameless Blade is, because it's been a while since it's been released, its first pref weapon as well as Carol. It basically does cooldown -1 plus Wodao. If you're transformed, you get Wodao. That's about all you have to understand about the weapon. As for the other effect that actually matters, if the enemy, not you, if the enemy is at 75% HP or more, they lose 5 attack, speed, and def. That's effectively 5 attack, speed, def, and res for you. There's nothing they can really do against it except having less HP, which is not exactly easy to do. And if you proc a special, you get 1 charge at the end of combat. This is worth mentioning because this enables proccing Moonbow, getting hit, proccing Moonbow again, and then just doing that several times in the same turn very easily, which is something that Ira, Larcey, and Shannon cannot do. They typically will proc, get hit, proc again, and then will have no charge to go up again and just proc again. Another thing to note is that there's no character like this in green whatsoever. She is an aggressive, damage-bursting unit. The only thing that's somewhat similar is Rinka, and I guess Barst, but Barst is just a one-and-done character. Rinka is similar to more like Ira Larcey, where they proc, get hit, proc again. Which is really potent when it happens, but, well, let's just say Nyla is more effective at doing it several times. She also has a few tricks up her sleeve that, I'm going to be completely honest with you, Rinka just cannot even hope to do. So there's that. Overall, her stat line is very solid. It's very reminiscent of Larcey. It's funny because I ended up just guessing her stat line. I was correct on HP, attack, speed, and the difference between def and res was she had 1 more def than I thought and 1 less res. That's it. The rest I guessed perfectly, so I mean, there's that, I guess. Now, let's talk about comparisons. So, obviously Duo Alm is going to be here. That's really the main comparison you can make here. So, as I said before, obviously Nyla is transformed in this comparison, so you have at least one kind of idea of what you're doing here. Now, Alm is a really good unit for all of the wrong reasons. He basically takes your def and adds it to his damage. He basically takes your res and adds it to his bulk. He's just really obnoxious in general. But Nyla is just kind of doing all of that and more. Let me just put it this way, okay? Scepter of Love is a very good skill. But the thing is, it's dependent on your enemy's defense / res. And that one of the problems that you run into, okay, is the fact that first off, you need your unit to have a buff or be above 70% HP. That means if you get knocked down under 70%, it typically will do nothing, especially if you get panicked, like say Panic Smoke. That will actually hurt you quite a bit. Whereas Nyla only needs the enemy to be at over 75%, which is a lot more reliable. Because the thing with Duo Alm is that you'll use him to tank several things. If at the end of tanking several things, you are under 70% HP, that can be a problem, especially if you don't have any buffs. Nyla is just basically a single check for HP, and if the enemy's HP is under 75%, it's probably because it's basically dead. If it's not already dead, because Nyla does so much damage. Now, I know what some people will already say also, but Jay, Alm has Lunar Flash. Shouldn't that actually count for something? And yes it should. But the thing of the matter is, okay, Lunar Flash will typically do about 20 damage. Moonbow plus Wodao will do about 20 damage. So they are actually very similar. The difference is that, well, Nyla has cooldown -1. Alm does not have cooldown -1. So Alm cannot just do proc, get hit, proc again unless he runs Slaying Edge. And the second you run Slaying Edge, you're comparing Nyla, who has Slaying Edge, and Wodao, which the Wodao is basically just making up for not having Lunar Flash, but you do -5 across the board. That is an insane debuff. Now, you can also bring the fact that, you know, the fact Scepter of Love basically takes 25% of the enemy's attack, and inflicted on penalty. I'll just read it straight up. If you have the condition, grants bonus to units' attack equal to 25% of foe's defense, so basically taking the enemy's defense, putting it as your attack. The problem with this is that if you're dealing with a combat disadvantage, yes, you're going to say take that 30 defense, add yourself 7 attack, but the problem you run into with this is the fact that if the enemy is, say, red, that 7 attack will go down to 6 or 5, so you actually lose from it. So it doesn't really help you, it doesn't really enables you to win matchup that you are losing that much easier. And it just enables you to win harder matchup that you already wins. And then the other part is inflict penalty to foe's attack equals to 25% of foe's res during combat. This can be shaky. If you have to deal with a unit that has lower res, yikes, you're kind of in a bad position. So, yeah, it's overall a bit iffy. I'm not saying the weapon is bad, it's overall fairly solid, but Nyla is a sure value weapon. Not to mention, cooldown -1 versus speed +3. Come on, cooldown -1 is just in general better. And Nyla is very similar to Bulk, to all. Okay? Very, very, very similar. And because she does -5 attack, this helps you win matchup that you're meant to lose a lot more. Because if you do -5 attack on a red unit, it's like they lose 6 attack because they don't gain the extra attack point from 5 attack because of the color disadvantage, or color advantage rather. So say you have 50 attack, you jump to 60 attack because of color advantage. But if you have 50 and I go down to 45 because I do -5 attack, and then you have the color advantage, it goes from 45 to 54. 16 minus 54, 6 points of difference. I think you get the idea. So Nyla enables winning matchups that she should not win as easily, which is very helpful. But really, the main thing is, she basically has a very similar stat line to Alm. That's just a given, right? I mean, you see the stats right here. They have basically the same attacks, the same res, almost the same def, almost the same speed, and the same health. They are very similar units, but Alm cannot really do burst damage. Nyla can. The only thing that Alm can really do that Nyla cannot do is a repel build, which, yes, is solid, but being able to just shut down units, even if you have a combat disadvantage, is disgusting. This Nyla can do nasty things. I mean, if you've seen my Ira in action like a year or so ago, back when I was using her a lot more often, you should know that I ended up dealing with a Brave Hector that was on a Def tile. So with Ira. Ira's red, Brave Hector's blue. I still killed him because my 3x2 jumped up to 32 times 2. Because of Wrath and Ragnalastra. Nyla can do something similar, but has just overall better stats and makes the enemy lose 5 across the board. I think you can kind of understand how insane that is. And another thing is just the fact that Alm does not touch the enemy speed. Nyla does. So even if you're dealing with a repel unit, the enemy loses 5 speed. So repel becomes a lot less consistent for them as well. Even if you don't want to invest in Nyla's speed, you'll have 56 speed. with a buff and a weapon. So yeah, really, really good. Like I said, the main reason that you would want to use Alm over Nyla is Repel, but personally I would use Nyla every day, not only because I have a certain bias to her, but also because she can just kill units that you would struggle with. If you run Repel on Alm, yes, you will be hard to kill, but sometimes you will also miss kills as a result. That's one of the reasons I don't really like Repel. I prefer to go all out on damage, and Nyla just enables that very, very well. As for Rinka, Rinka is very similar to the way you would use Nyla, with Time's Pulse comboed into Wrath, effectively giving you all the charge you need for Bonfire, and once you're under full HP, you can just basically get 2 charge every time you get hit, which means you can just proc Bonfire, get hit, and proc Bonfire again. Now, this will do more damage than what Nyla does. The problem with this, though, is the fact that she is a death wall, but her res is utter garbage. You see here, 25 res is about as high as it gets. Nyla, because of her weapon, effectively has 38 res here. You see the difference here? It's kind of the same thing of Oboro versus Larse, right? Yes, Oboro has more defense, but at the end of the day, Nyla will be able to survive way more matchups and will also be able to run a lot of things a lot better. Not to mention, I haven't mentioned this yet, but the charge that she gets back from her weapon, boy oh boy, that enables so much stuff. You will be surprised, I'm pretty sure. But yes, I would say overall Rinka is better burst damage than Nyla, but Nyla is more consistent and is able to take hits where it matters more. That said, Rinka is a very solid counter to specific unit like Legendary Crumb, which is a growing pain for a lot of players. So yes, overall I would say Nyla is more helpful in more situation. Rinka is a bit more niche but very strong in her niche. Alm is good, but he's more so in a defensive set, whereas Nyla is more focused on damage. Cooldown -1 does one hell of a difference when you're meant to do damage with your special a lot. Seriously, it's actually kind of ridiculous. Now, let's talk about builds. It's been over an hour already, and we're still going. So, this is obviously the more damage-intensive set. You see Dragon Fang here? I'm sure some of you are very surprised and confused as to why I'm using Dragon Fang of all things. Look at her attack. 64, 68 because of Joint Drive attack, and 75 because of Brazen Attack res. So that's 37 damage with Dragon Fang, sorry. You have overall 80 attack because the weapon makes the enemy lose 5 def. Great. 80 attack per hit with a Moonbow, or with Dragon Fang on top of it. Dragon Fang that does 37 damage. 37 damage plus 10 damage because of the Wood Arrow effect. That's 47 damage. You will consistently kill stuff that you should not be killing with this. And the reason why that's worth mentioning, okay, why I'm using Dragon Fang, is because Special Spiral combos into Bride's Fang. You get one charge because of Bride's Fang, you get 2 from Special Spiral, so you get 3 total. So, Dragon Fang does 47 damage, you one-shot, the fight's over, you get 3 charge back, and you just repeat the process. She basically does something very similar to what Barst does, which is just, you know, Time's Pulse, Wrath, and then Wrath in the weapon to just do a ton of damage in one go. But unlike Barst that can only just splurge once per turn, she can do it infinitely. And she can do it on enemy phase as well for several attacks, which is really insane. And on top of this, because of Brazen Attack res and because of Bride's Fang, she effectively has 46 defense and 47 res the second that she's in Brazen range. So she's not even easy to take down either. 56 speed, so Repel is also going to be not that effective against her either. Just overall, she's going to be a death machine. That's basically the best way to describe it. The set on the left is the more classical set, which is just proccing Moonbow with plus 20 true damage because, you know, Wrath and Bride's Fang. And then getting hit, and then proccing again, and because of Bride's Fang, it refills itself, so you can just do it again with a Dancer. Again, Nyla is utterly broken. There is so much you can do offensively with her. Honestly, I'm probably just scraping the surface. But yes, overall a very solid unit. Now, there is another set of builds I will want to mention. So, here's the thing that you can do about Nyla. Here's with Noontime. So obviously I'm not going to use Wrath. The reason why Noontime is an option is because you get 10 damage from Bride's Fang, right? And you also get the charge back from Bride's Fang. Typically you run Wrath because it gives you the extra charge at the start of the turn. You don't need it anymore because Bride's Fangs already gives you this. So you can actually run a low skill instead. Which means low skills plus Mirror Stance 2 plus Bride's Fang, you're basically looking at 41-43, 44-46, 49-51. That's a pretty bulky unit, and when it comes down to damage, 61, 64, 68, 72, 77 attack. Yeah. And you can just keep proccing. You can also play this on player phase and just proc, get hit, proc and heal back some more. You will, at this point, you're really difficult to take down. And if you want to take that even a step further, you can combo Bride's Fang into Special Spiral, and then you get 3 charge back out of 4, okay? Which is really solid already, right? But it effectively means your Aether is 4 charge, but you get 3 back. That means you have 1 charge left, which means you get hit, you proc Aether every single time. You don't even need Brave Lucina to combo into this. You can just bring Kaden, which is really helpful because Kaden is a beast unit, so there's no chance of Nyla de-transforming and losing a lot of damage overall if you're using Kaden instead. And Kaden also offers more stats than Brave Lucina. So this is also a really good option to run in general. Our attack is also high enough that you can combo this into Legendary Eliwood if you want to have even more damage. Though at that point I would really suggest going Attack Plus if you want it to be more consistent. Really solid unit with this overall. And basically Aether will get a plus 10 damage because of Bride's Fang. So you will typically kill a lot of things that you shouldn't be killing already, while also healing yourself back. Which is, yeah, this is the Nyla experience. And, yeah. Pretty happy to see my girl actually being very solid, to be honest. But yeah, I think that's about all I have to say about this banner. Overall, I'd say my thoughts about this banner is pretty mixed. I don't like the fact that Micaiah got another ult. I don't care about Micaiah personally. And I feel like Path of Radiance / Radiant Dawn should stop. Like, I'm not saying this because Nyla got an ult and now I don't care about anyone from Path of Radiance / Radiant Dawn. I'm saying this because 2018 we got Seneki. 2019 we got Tanith and Sigrun. 2020 we got 4, count them, 4 Path of Radiance / Radiant Dawn character. Now, I will say, Micaiah and Soph, probably a pretty lame pick. Honestly, it's just kind of boring to me. You may have a different opinion, that's fine. Raphael and Nyla are such a niche pick, however, I was really pleasantly surprised. So there is that. Oboro, I find weird that he's not with Takumi, but whatever. Honestly, I just hope they switch to other games. I find it kind of mediocre that the game where marriage comes from, which is FE4, has no unit in Bridal banners. There's like so many combos you can do. Arinus Lowin, Quan Eflin, Granny Eldigan, Sigurd Deirdre. Like there's so many pairing you can do. Lene Eris if you want, which is like the most implied pairing. Like there's a lot of things you can do. The main, all of those I pointed out outside of Eris are canonical. Same thing with Finn and Lachesis. That's also canonical. And honestly, really wish they would actually start touching that. FE4 does not have a single alt outside of Julia, which is getting honestly stale and ridiculous. Even though I like Julia, even though I find her very wholesome, and I like her for that, enough is enough. I'd like to see more than just one character. It's the same thing with Reinhardt getting 3 alts, Ishtar getting an alt because Reinhardt, Owen getting an alt because Reinhardt, and so on and so forth. I would like to see more from the game instead of just the same characters getting alts over and over again. And Bridal banners are like the best one to go with this. But yeah, like I said, those are niche picks. I'm happy with the picks. I just wish, you know, it was different games. The first anniversary was nice because it was 4 different games. It's like not first anniversary, but the first Bridal banner was 4 different games, which was nice. Second year, we also got 3 different banners, though technically actually 4 because of the Tempest trial. The year after, it started to deteriorate a bit because we got Sigrun and Tanith for some reason, which was kind of depressing. But this year they kind of really dropped the ball. Only 2 different games, like really? But yeah, enough of me rambling about this. I kept you all long enough. Hopefully this was helpful to some. I'm kind of recording this at 3 AM and I have to sleep because I have to stream tomorrow, so hopefully I covered everything I wanted to cover. So, yes. With that said, I'll be seeing you all next time or in the comment. Have a nice night, everyone. Or a nice day, whichever it is at this point. This video will be out at like 4 AM, so it's fine. Anyway, have a good night, y'all. See ya.